The moment Denzel Washington agreed to appear on a nationally televised panel alongside Chief Justice John Roberts, no one could have predicted the collision course they were about to witness. The network pitched it as a civil, high-level discussion on the intersection of justice, race, culture in America, a place where Denzel's decades of social engagement would meet the cold authority of the nation's top judge. What unfolded, however, was anything but balanced. From the very beginning, the tone was off. Denzel, calm and composed in a navy suit, answered the first few questions with his signature blend of grace and grit. He spoke passionately about the role of the arts in exposing injustice and how narratives, films, books, culture play a vital role in shaping societal empathy. But when Roberts was asked whether the judicial system had adequately responded to the racial reckoning of recent years, his answer came across as stiff, defensive, and completely out of sync. "We apply the law as it is," Roberts said flatly, "not as people wish it to be." Denzel raised an eyebrow, but said nothing yet. The tension began to simmer when the moderator asked Denzel if he believed the legal system was capable of genuine reform. His response was direct, thoughtful, but pointed. "You can't reform something you won't admit is broken," he said. "The law may be blind, but justice hasn't been for a long time." That statement visibly irritated Roberts. He shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening as he leaned toward the microphone. "With all due respect, Mr. Washington," he began, "your fame doesn't qualify you to pass judgment on an institution you clearly don't understand from the inside." Denzel turned toward him slowly. "I may not wear a robe," he replied, evenly, "but I've walked through courtrooms you only see in case files where young men get decades for mistakes. A judge would call youthful if they had a different skin tone." The audience was stunned. The moderator tried to cut in, but Roberts raised his voice, uncharacteristically losing composure. "That's outrageous," he snapped, "and frankly irresponsible coming from someone who plays make-believe for a living." Gasps echoed across the studio. Denzel didn't flinch. He didn't blink, simply turned back to Roberts and uttered, "You just told on yourself, sir." That single line seemed to cut deeper than any monologue in his storied film career. Roberts, now visibly red in the face, tried to retake control of the exchange. "We are governed by the Constitution, not emotion," he barked, "not by outrage or by popularity contests on TV." Denzel leaned forward calmly. "Then maybe it's time the Constitution checked its prescription, because it hasn't been seen clearly for a very long time." The room went silent. Roberts looked around, clearly shocked that his own outburst had not earned him the deference he expected. "I don't come here for theatrics," he muttered. "You just brought them," Denzel replied coolly. It wasn't a shout, it wasn't even defiant. It was that quiet, bone-deep kind of response that makes a man question what he just said. And in that moment, Roberts didn't just look like a Chief Justice. He looked like a man realizing he had been publicly outclassed. What followed next was an awkward pause that seemed to stretch for minutes. The moderator nervously tried to return the conversation to civility, but the damage was done. Roberts looked visibly uncomfortable, gripping the armrests of his chair while stealing quick glances at the audience and camera. Denzel, meanwhile, sat like a statue, controlled, centered, untouchable. "Let's be clear," he finally said. "This isn't about politics. It's about people. Real people. The ones you don't see in your courtroom because they can't afford a lawyer or don't survive the arrest." The audience broke into spontaneous applause, clearly moved. Roberts, perhaps sensing the optics slipping further, launched into a long-winded defense of the judiciary's objectivity. But it was clear his earlier anger had cracked the facade. "I don't do this for claps," Denzel said, interrupting calmly. "I speak because I've seen the other side. Looked mothers in the eye whose sons never came home, not because they were guilty, but because they were born in the wrong zip code." From that point forward, Roberts seemed desperate to claw back authority. He accused Denzel of undermining public trust in legal institutions. But Denzel wasn't rattled. "Public trust isn't undermined by truth," he said. "It's undermined by silence." Then came the moment that would become the viral loop on every screen in America. Roberts leaned forward, voice raised again, and said, "Enough. You don't understand the burden of responsibility that comes with interpreting law that affects 330 million people." And Denzel, with that same stoic calm, looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You don't understand the burden of being judged by laws that were never written with you in mind." The room exploded, not with chaos, but with that stunned, shivering quiet that only follows pure, unfiltered truth. Roberts leaned back in his chair, completely speechless. The moderator tried to move on to the next topic, but the gravity of what had just occurred made it impossible to pretend. This wasn't now something entirely different. The network cut to commercial early. During the break, staff members surrounded both men, some urging Roberts to cool down, others quietly asking Denzel if he was willing to stay for the final segment. He nodded without emotion, but when the cameras returned, he was gone. Dramatic. Exit. No words of farewell. It's just an empty chair and a stunned panel trying to regroup. The show continued, but the energy had flatlined. On social media, the reaction was instant and volcanic. Clips of the confrontation spread across every platform, each replayed with commentary ranging from celebratory to scandalized. News anchors interrupted scheduled programming to dissect the clip. Hashtags like hashtag Denzel vs. Roberts, hashtag Constitution Clash, and hashtag Cold Response flooded every feed. By the end of the night, it was the top story on every major outlet. People weren't just watching a celebrity speak. They were watching a man hold the most powerful legal voice in the country accountable without losing his temper, raising his voice, or stepping outside of dignity for a single moment. The next morning. Office released a brief, tightly worded statement. Chief Justice John Roberts regrets the tenor of yesterday's exchange and affirms the importance of respectful public dialogue. It was far from an apology, but clearly an attempt to do damage control. Denzel Washington, on the other hand, remained silent. No tweets, no interviews, no statements. Silence spoke volumes. The media couldn't get enough. Editorials praised his restraint, called it a masterclass in decorum. Others criticized him for supposedly ambushing the Chief Justice. But the consensus from ordinary people was clear. Denzel hadn't gone to pick a fight. He'd gone to speak truth. When truth makes power uncomfortable, history tends to notice. Civil rights leaders praised the moment, drawing parallels to past confrontations where artists had become unexpected truth-tellers. You don't have to wear a robe to know what justice looks like, one activist posted. And Denzel showed us that justice doesn't always wear one either. Academics began unpacking the confrontation like it was a historical event. In some ways it was. In classrooms, on podcasts, and even in church pulpits. People were analyzing not just the content of Denzel's words, but the way he delivered them. There was no shouting match, no name-calling, no theatrics.
Yes.
Just presence. Calm. Authority rooted not in status, but in experience. And that, perhaps, is why it hit so hard. Denzel didn't try to win an argument. He just said what needed to be said and let the truth do the rest. In an era when viral clips often come from meltdowns or sarcasm, this moment was different. It was serious, it was solemn. It felt like a line had been drawn not just in that studio, but in the cultural conversation itself. One that asked, who gets to speak about justice? Who gets to define what's broken? And more importantly, who's brave enough to say it in front of those who claim the power to fix it but won't? Roberts may have expected deference that day, but instead he got a mirror. And for someone who has spent his life cloaked in the power of precedent, he wasn't ready to be challenged by someone whose authority came not from a gavel, but from experience. Denzel, in his stillness, reminded millions that there is more than one kind of justice, and that sometimes the most powerful response isn't a roar, it's a quiet truth spoken to power's face, without apology. Behind closed doors, networks began rethinking how they structure these cross-sale panels. Some questioned if it was worth the risk. Others quietly acknowledged that this was the kind of moment television rarely captures any more authentic, raw, unscripted. Denzel never addressed the incident again, even when invited to, and that decision only added to the legend. He had said what he needed to say, and he didn't owe the story a second act. What more could he possibly add?